Welcome everybody to another episode of IGN Unfiltered, our monthly interview series where I get to sit down with the best, brightest, most notable names and minds of the games industry. I'm extremely pleased to be joined by Gearbox CEO and co-founder Randy Pitchford this month. Hey Randy.
How's it going?
It's going well. Appreciate you making time to come on in.
I was excited to be here until I just heard your introduction. I'm not sure I live up to that, but...
Well, you have a heck of a story, though.
Okay.
I was telling you before we went on camera. Normally, I end up with about 20 questions or so, makes it for about an hour conversation. But no, your career, it's like 30. I've got like 35 questions ready to go because you've done a lot.
I like making stuff. I feel like I think I mentioned this to you. I feel like I'm just figuring it out, though. I feel like I'm just at the beginning, and it's weird to look back and realize, oh yeah, there's been some stuff we've done.
So this is only phase one of the
we'll
Randy
see.
Pitchford cinematic
We'll see.
universe.
I mean, I might get clipped as I leave the building today. We'll see what happens.
Hopefully not. But let's start. I wanted to start with I like to go all the way back to childhood and try and establish some building blocks here. What were some of your favorite games as a kid?
Man, well, let's see. I think the first thing I remember that you could call a video game, my father flew me to Los Angeles from where we lived in Maryland, in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and my parents were getting a divorce. They were separated, and I was 5 years old. I don't even remember it really, but I do remember that to placate me, he bought me this device. And it was one of those early kind of electronic handheld games. And
I know the kind you're talking about. Yeah,
the theme of the game was racing. It was like drag race or something.
Right.
And the display was a series of LEDs. There were like 3 red LEDs, then a green LED. And then there was a little timer, like an old school LED watch timer that would just it could do two digits. And the interface was a switch, and it would go up or down. And so what you do is you'd start with it up, and the red light would go to the green, and when it hit the green, you had to switch it down, like shifting gears.
Yeah.
And the timer would start to count like what your reaction time was. And so the goal was to shift. If you shift before it turned green, it'd break, it'd stop.
Yeah.
So you had to wait till it to get to green, then you had to switch, and it was a reaction time skill test. And there were 4 gears, and then the race was over, and that was it. And as simple as that was, like that was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced up to my short life up to that point. But it was this machine that was a game and a toy, and I still remember it to this day. And I went to I was working with the guys that they founded the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, near where our headquarters are, outside of Dallas, Texas. And the National Video Game Museum guys have like this incredible collection of every handheld electronic game ever made, and I couldn't find the thing in my memory, but I found something that was very close, and I realized my memory rewrote the experience, because we don't.
It does that.
Our memories aren't perfect,
That's
right?
True.
So yeah, so that was probably the first video game I ever played, and my father, he was a super nerd. When the earliest memories I have, he worked for Xerox in Maryland. And they had like these giant supercomputers that he would build, like the Sigma 7 or something. And before that, I'd learned later in life that he was a spy. But he wasn't like the James Bond kind. He was like the Q kind that would make the gadgets and stuff.
Yeah.
And he worked for military intelligence and stuff. And then we moved out to California, and he did all kinds of stuff. He was literally a rocket scientist with doing telemetry on Minuteman missiles, and he was a Disney Imagineer for a while, and all kinds of just.
So electronic games were clearly a thing that was, if not encouraged, at least tolerated.
Oh, it was not merely encouraged, it was fueled. Like we always had the first computer that I had, my dad built, and when I say built, he didn't assemble it out of parts. Like the keyboard we had was this. The ends of the keyboard were wood blocks that he lathed in his workshop. There was this piece of metal that he had somehow bent and wrapped. He'd cut the shape out of it. The keys on the keyboard he bought them from some sorcerer. They were bought as individual things where he hand painted the letters and did his own circuit board and switches for the keys. He wrote his own BIOS.
Yeah.
Literally built a PC. Literally built the computer. And that was the first PC that I remember using as something with a keyboard on it, and I learned what an operating system was, and then from there upgraded to a CP/M-based computer that he built for me, and I learned, you know, CP/M is like a predecessor. It's like primordial DOS, which is, you know, primordial Windows. Except it's not Windows at all. It's just an early operating system. And anyway, yeah, that was my growing up with all this junk and awesomeness. And I had the knack, you know. My brother and I, we played with stuff in parallel for a while, and then clearly, like, it stuck with me, and I just dug in deeper and deeper and deeper as he started getting interested in other things.
So that explains why you wrote a text adventure game when you were around 11 or 12 or so.
Oh, I wrote lots of text adventures, most of them unfinished.
Do you remember the first one?
I mean, you know, the first things that you do in that, I mean, I remember one of the things I played with probably early on was believing, oh, I'm going to make D&D, right? But, like, I get through the character generation stuff and I'm out of memory, right? So, like, that's how, like, I had like 2K of RAM to work with, you know? So, yeah, and all kinds of stuff. I remember I felt like a god. One of the games that influenced me the most was a game called the Colossal Cave Adventure, which was a text adventure. It was the sort of the shared ancestor to the Zork series, right? And I had gotten a hold of a Scott Adams version that had been written in BASIC, which means you could look at the source code, because BASIC was an interpreted language instead of a compiled language, right? So with an interpreted language, if you can run the game, you have the source. Yeah. The source is the program, which was amazing. So I'm like, I'm discovering how it was programmed, and I learned what a dimensional array was, and I felt like I remember I made this. I didn't name it anything, but I created a dungeon that had 4 rooms, but they were legit. Like, up to that point, I'd games with tons of dungeons in, like you know, 15, 20 room dungeons it was all brute force. But this I created with a true 2x2 dimensional array, and had the logic that connected them all up, and I felt like I am a god. I am a god for discovering this.
So did you always want to, did that seal it for you for wanting to make games when you grew up?
I don't know, it sealed it for me.
Or did you have another thing you wanted to be when you grew up at any point?
I have a lot of things that I love entertainment, so, like,
we'll get to the magic stuff.
Yeah, but not just that, like, just in school, in elementary school and in middle school and in high school, like, I was always in theater and always, you know, doing speech and debate and stuff, and just, in high school I had to choose. They do where they have all the kids vote on what kids are going to be what in the yearbook, you know, and yeah. My options, and they decided you're only given one each, but I had the most votes in 2 categories. Which one do you want? And it was class clown and most spirited, and so they made me flip the coin on that one. Yeah, so I was always that guy, and I think computers were another path for that. Like, I would write little programs, and my dad had a bulletin board, and I would upload them to the bulletin board.
BBS.
Yeah. And, like, I remember when he got the Wildcat BBS system, and I was like, holy crap, like, this is so advanced. Like, if you look that up, if you don't know what that is, it's just, it's so primitive compared to today's standards. But,
so your dad was clearly very supportive of your of your programming and video and, you know, computer creative efforts.
In our house where we lived, we had this, there was like this separate little building that was like a shed in the back of the property, and he'd converted it in this, like, nerd man cave. And you know, he had a lock, and he had all his computers in there, and, like, he had the best gear. I mean, and all of his, like, you know, electrical engineering equipment. Like, that's where I learned to solder, you know. And I figured out how to break into the room, and after school I'd go in there and I'd just mess around with all his stuff for a few hours before he came home from work. And because at the time he was working at Vandenberg Air Force Base, doing missile stuff. In fact, I think we just launch a new nuke missile test without the nuke in it. Like 2 days after we learned about North Korea, we launched another Minuteman out of Vandenberg, just to make sure we can still fire those bad boys off. Shit's getting real. All right, we may as well talk about it now, because we might not be here next week.
Hopefully this episode will air at some point.
But yeah, so I figured out how to break in there, and I knew he knew it, but he didn't. He just let it go. that was when
That's great.
That's when I knew he was behind me having the knack.
So where does the penchant for magic come from? And I'm not talking about Magic the Gathering. You are an actual, you are a practicing magician.
Yeah, I don't know. It's entertainment's awesome. So my wife has a theory. She's got a degree in psychology and neuroscience, and she's all that world. I'm not that world, but she told me about this this experiment you can do. You can hook someone up to an fMRI. Do you know what an fMRI is?
I do not.
Okay, do you know what an MRI is?
Absolutely.
It takes a picture of a brain.
Yes.
So an fMRI is a functional MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and the functional means it happens in real time. So you hook a bunch of electrodes up to a person,
so you can see
and you can look at the brain in
left
real
brain,
time
right brain activity, that
on
kind
the
of thing.
computer, and you can see what's lighting up as you're stimulating a person or interacting with them. You can see what part of the brain's lighting up, right? So you hook someone up to an fMRI, and then you make them feel something, like make them laugh, or prick their finger with a pin, make them feel pain. So when they laugh, a certain part of their brain lights up, and when they feel pain, a different part of their brain lights up, right? And then you have the same person, they're still hooked up, and have them watch someone else laugh, or have them watch someone else get their finger pricked with a pin. And when they watch someone else laugh, the same part of their brain lights up. And when they watch someone, get hurt, the pain part lights up. And that's what empathy is, basically. The same, we have the same experiences when we see other people have them, but we're not all calibrated the same way. Some of us are broken, and like a sociopath, for example, when they see someone else feel pain, they don't have it in themselves. And sometimes it's miswired, and they feel happiness instead of pain when they like a sociopath who's also a sadist is like the worst case scenario, right? But this is all biologically possible, and there's probably evolutionary reasons why some of us are wired wrong. So my wife's hypothesis with me is I'm like the opposite of that, where I actually get more of a feeling when other people are having a good time than even when I'm having it myself, because like everything, whenever I consume something great, like what doesn't matter what it is, like my immediate thought is like, oh, let's give that to somebody else. Let's go do it to somebody else. Let's take that and try it and maybe make it better, or let's tweak it, and then we can give someone else the experience and feel what that's like. And I think that's been there all along. And magic is incredible for that. Like, what a drug! Like
when did you pick it up?
When you fry somebody's brain with something, and they react, and you just, and it's just like, there's nothing like that in the world. It's real time. It's instantaneous. You know exactly how. You don't have to, work on a game for 4 years and then wait, after cert and then see the reviews and and you're like, it's all so gone by the time you even understand what this is like instant. You know whether you did it or not, like in the moment. So it's really strong in that regard. But like I had a magic set when I was a kid, and that was probably the beginning. And there's probably a reason why I was given the magic set. I don't really remember, but exactly the moment it all started. But my mom saved my magic set that I had when I was a kid.
Oh, that's cool.
It was pristine. I had everything in the right plot. There's only one broken thing and one missing thing. I did. I really took good care of it. But there was the manual was falling apart. Like the pages were it was a mess. But it was all together. But the pages would literally come out because they'd become unglued from the binding. And there was a piece of paper that I'd made a sign on that was in there. And it was the saddest thing. And this might also explain. And I could laugh about it today because I don't even remember this thing. But when I saw it later as an adult, I'm like, oh my God. The sign said, "Out of business, nobody would pay attention."
Oh.
And then in parentheses said, "or my fee." And I don't know what that was like. I had to make a joke about it. But I knew that was a thing too. Getting my parents' attention was one of the most impossible things in the world when I was a kid. And it was probably because I was a stupid kid and I'm completely uninterested or uninteresting to an adult sophisticated mind. And they just had to, let me mature and turn into something else, I guess. I don't know. Just make sure he's fed, make sure he's, not cold at night.
Well, that's.
But they gave me plenty of things to play with. And
so you made your own.
I know,
fun.
it sounds so sad.
Way.
It's like, oh, but I'm okay. I'm not messed up. At least I think I'm okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm messed up.
I think we could all be in a psychiatrist's office for something.
Sure, I think
I could be.
Hey, wait, are we human? Let me check.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think.
So let's fast forward. How things progress. How do you end up landing your first professional role in the games industry, 3D Realms?
Yeah.
How does that come along?
So let's see. I was going to UCLA and I was performing magic in Hollywood, and the first thing that happened was, and I was with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, but we were in this kind of pseudo marriage relationship, where you're basically cohabitating and you're existing as a couple. You just haven't actually, done any ceremony or anything. I thought, like, before that moment, it's like I'm on this path where I'm going to be a lawyer.
Huh.
Right? Like I'm going to...
That doesn't fit with anything you just spent the last 15 minutes telling me.
I know, right? It's totally different reasons for that. But and what she helped me kind of figure out was that, like, I was just sort of genetically made for entertainment. Like there was something about me there. And so as I realized that she was right and started to accept that reality and realize that I'd just, been wasting a lot of time and I'd been, doing this thing that I thought I was supposed to do instead of the thing that I should be doing, I dove into it and thought, okay, what is this? And at the time I thought, I'm going to have to become a professional magician, because it never occurred to me in a million years that you could actually get paid to make video games.
Yeah.
Like that was no path.
It's
to
funny
making a
that
living.
you thought making a living as a professional magician was more viable.
I know. Well,
not
at the
to
time,
disregard.
At the time, I didn't know it at the time. I was young. I had braces on my teeth. I was the luckiest young magician on the planet. There's this place in LA called Universal City Walk at Universal Studios.
Sure, yeah.
And they had literally just built it. I was working as a tour guide at Universal Studios, and the City Walk was just opening.
I think you'd have been good at that job.
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
I bet you were good.
I loved being a tour guide. That was the best job.
Like on the earthquake tour
all of it,
thing?
All of it.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I was doing the earthquake when the earthquake in Northridge happened. I mean, I wasn't on it, but I was working that circuit when the earthquake happened. It was like, okay. And like, they got us therapy. Like, I'm fine. It's fine. Like the corporation was all concerned about, all the employees that have to ride the earthquake ride every day.
They were 10
times a day. Yeah, they were really concerned. But it was nothing. But anyway, yeah. So I was doing that. City Walk was this big thing. They're opening, and then one of the businesses on the Universal City Walk was this nightclub that had a dinner theater and a bar and a gift shop, and it was called Wizards, and it was a magic nightclub. I'm like, So they're building it out, and I just walked in one day after my shift.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, when are you guys opening, and do you need any help? And I talked to the guy that was running the place. I didn't know at the time. His name's Fred Wood, great magician. He's been around. He knows the shit. And he asked me what I knew and what I could do. And I showed him a couple of things. He's like, "You're hired."
That's cool.
And I got a job on the pretty much on the spot to be one of the magicians that opened this new magic club. And it was like, magicians don't have jobs. Like we hustle, we scrape, we get gigs, right?
Yeah.
We get gigs. I had a job. Like I had a salary. I punched in. Like I was a magician that would punch in, and I would stroll in the bar. And my favorite thing was the gift shop and working the magic table, because it was like a magic shop in Universal City Walk where there's 1,000 tourists a day coming in. It was the most amazing workout ever. But that was, and I was doing well. I was making money, and I had a fixed income from my salary, but I was also making tips on top.
Nice.
And I was averaging about, and at my age, this is incredible, but I was averaging about 55 grand a year.
That's really impressive.
And for a close-up magician in Los Angeles, like that's hard to do, like for mature close-up magicians,
right?
And
in like early 90s at this point too, right?
This is like 91, right? Like, and it was just, or 92, I think. And it was, I did not understand how lucky I was to have scored that. So I thought, oh, this is like the beginning. Magic can go a long way, and I'm like seeing, some of my idols like Penn and Teller killing it for a career-long, experience, and I'm realizing, this is a path. I'm talking to the older magicians. This guy that I worked with at the club named Warren Gibson, who's like, yeah, I'm saving up money because making money here, and I'm gonna open my own club in Maui. And he freaking did it. Like,
nice.
You can go and see Warren and Annabelle's in Maui, and it's one of the greatest magic shows you'll ever see. If anybody's in Maui, check it out. I highly recommend it. And Warren's awesome. And if you tell him you know me, he'll take care of you. Anyway, like that just seemed like that's a path. and I can figure this out, and that'll be a whole career. And then but I never really thought that was going to be my career until my wife's like, you're going to be an entertainer. So I started really thinking about it as a career, and that's when I realized, oh, I don't know, like, to really make a lot of money or to kind of grow it, like, I'm going to have to figure out how to get famous. Okay, that's weird. I don't know how to get famous. How do I get on TV? Like, because you can't just, like, the salary was nice, but like that was going to play itself out. And I started thinking about like more entrepreneurial like thinking. Like, okay, I'm a close-up magician, so how many people can I get into a room? Okay, if I do a 15-minute show, how many times can I do that a day? How much can I charge the people? And I'm doing the math on this, and it's like, oh. Because I'm a nerd too, right? Like, so I've got a spreadsheet, I'm figuring this out, and I'm like, oh, close-up magic is probably not the best vehicle for, maximizing the return for the entertainment time I have to invest. And by the way, the secret of magicians, and I learned, it's true, I knew this. It was Teller who put it in this phrase for me that provided these words to articulate this truth. And the truth is this, and this is a paraphrase from something Teller told me. The reason why magicians can do what they do and why they're able to fool people is because no one can actually contemplate how much time they're willing to invest in a stupid thing that no one else in the world would do, that put that much time into. Because whether it's a move or a particular nuance in a way something's presented, it's just an absurd amount of time to do it.
I believe it.
To get, and if you know simple tricks, you know the difference between what you're doing and when you see a professional really fool a lot of people with something, and that difference is a stupid amount of time. So I'm thinking about the time and the return and how many, and it's like, this isn't going to be, there's a ceiling there. And what I was jumping away from was this world that I clearly wasn't destined for, but had been programmed to consider was what you can maximize as an attorney, right? And like, there's a big disparate.
I believe it.
The ceiling is completely different in this scenario, or the ceiling actually is it's the bell curve.
Yeah.
Right, the middle of the bell curve looks great for attorneys, and the higher end looks even better. There is like an edge case of magician, but it's like a crazy edge case. You have to get to Copperfield.
It's like making the NFL.
And Penn and Teller. It's more than that. There's fewer. There are fewer magicians in the world that are at that edge case than there are in a single NFL team. It's worse worse than making the NFL. It's you can't count on one hand the number of magicians that have reached that peak. Like, if you try it right now, you'll say David Blaine, David Copperfield. If depending on how old you are and how douchey you are, you might say Chris Angel, Penn and Teller, and then you start to go, what?
Yeah,
and you really run into. I can keep going. I know a lot of magicians, but most people, they can get some of those four, and then they kind of hit a wall, and that's really interesting, right? So, but here's something else that was going on at the same time, right? I'm still a nerd. I'm still programming. I'm spending time at home making.
Yeah, here
things.
we go. I can't wait till
I know
this around
like,
to 3D realms. We've been on a walk right now.
Here's the problem with me. This is the problem with me. You'll learn.
I'm gonna have to rein you in the next hour, aren't I?
That's okay.
That's fine. You can go. It's my job.
So I'll get there more. So at the same time, I'm on CompuServe and on AOL. And I'm writing programs, and some of them are little tools that I've made for myself. And I'm like, I'll just upload it. And, and I made this one tool that was, I can't remember what it was, because I made a bunch of tools. But there was one thing I wrote that I uploaded, and I don't want to reference the wrong one because I'd uploaded a whole bunch of stuff. But one of them I uploaded, and then the next day I checked it, and it was downloaded like 2,000 times. And that, when we think about video games today at the scale, 2,000 doesn't seem like a big number. But when what happened that morning, like, it was literally from like 11 p.m. the night before to like, maybe 10 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah.
And 2,000 downloads. And I thought, that's insane. That's more people than I performed magic for in the last 2 months.
Right.
And it just kind of flipped a little bit. And so I started thinking about, can video games be a career? Like, I don't know how good I am, but I know when I switched from like taking classes towards law at UCLA to taking a computer science class, like the computer science class, I felt like I'm running circles around these people. Like they're not teaching me anything. I'm already so far ahead of where they are. And that's just the nature of how fast technology moves, and the fact, you know, the folks doing it themselves sometimes get ahead of academia. It's starting to catch up, but so then I started, okay, let's see what that's like. So I started looking around, and I discovered that video games, professional, like commercial video games, did not come from where I thought they came from. Like, I thought there was a chocolate factory with a river and Oompa Loompas and just some magic happened, because like my stuff was very primitive. It actually wasn't primitive, but I didn't have all the components, right? I'm just one guy doing the things I knew how to do. And what I discovered is there's places where different people that have different skills can come together and put their capabilities together and have and that's how the thing that we see when we play games comes out as. And so I just went for it, and I started sending demos and resumes to every video game company I could find. And I got
Scott Miller called you?
I got it was Steve Blackburn, who was the COO of 3D Realms.
Gotcha.
But I got hits from everybody. That in that period in the early 90s, there was so much more demand than there was supply.
Oh, it was a boom town
that if you could do anything, you were like raw meat to a pack of rabid dogs. So I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I was spending like all of my time suddenly went to just answering and responding to folks that were, you know, interested in talking to me about the potential of me working for them. And in that experience, I narrowed it down to two choices of people that were saying, I want to offer you a job. And one of them was 3D Realms, was Apogee. And I liked that as a choice because I loved Wolfenstein and the id guys.
They were huge at the time as
well. Yeah, they were going somewhere. And I also knew, wow, I could actually help these guys. Like, I wouldn't be just learning, I could actually contribute and make them go faster and better. And I could already see it just looking at and I'd gotten, I'd actually became a beta tester for them and learned more about what they're up. But then at the same time, one of the other offers that I really liked was from LucasArts. They wanted to start making a first-person shooter in the Star Wars universe.
Dark
I
Forces.
love yeah, it became Dark Forces, and I love Star Wars. So, but I ultimately chose Apogee, not because I wanted to move to Texas, but because they offered me a share of the profit and a piece of the pie.
And there's your spreadsheet in your head.
Yes.
Alarm
like
bells going
all
off.
Fit right. And meanwhile, Lucas, like the people I was talking to there, it was really weird because I had to go through all these layers before I could even talk to someone that was an actual person, like the HR, and like it was very, you know, kind of corporate-y. At least it felt like that at the time. And then their attitude to me was like, you know, you should be paying us. You get to work on Star Wars. You know, it was like they weren't really. It was weird, you know. But it was Lucas, Star Wars. So I almost win it. I almost did it. I wonder what my life would have been like.
So there's an alternate universe where that's the route you went.
Yeah.
All right, so we're like 20-something minutes in or whatever, and I'm on like question 4. So I'm going to turbo ahead with you.
Yeah, just, you know what, and cut me off.
3D Realms, Duke Nukem 3D, huge hit. You're a level designer. I'm curious, was the rivalry with id Software a real thing, or was that just a fan thing? Because I was a player. I was playing Duke and Doom and Quake and everything back then, and that was, you know, you heard about that out. But was that an internal thing too, or was that just?
I can only talk about myself.
Yeah.
I didn't have it. Like Tom Hall worked at Apogee, and he and I became fast friends.
Yeah.
Actually, we became friends even before I took the job. And to this day, he's one of my favorite people on the planet. I love Tom Hall, and we don't get to spend as much time together because he doesn't live in the same city anymore. But when I do, I just feel like I just love the guy. He's so great, and I love John Romero, and like I never felt any rivalry. I think it was probably tricky for George and Scott to know that they discovered. They, you know, recruited these guys and brought them to Texas and did help them a lot. And, you know, but also, couldn't figure out how to be equitable enough with them where they wanted to be partners forever. And so after just Wolfenstein, the id guys separated, and went their own way and achieved even higher success with Doom and with Quake and so on. And I think that was really difficult. I felt, I don't want to speak for them, but I felt it felt like it was difficult for them. And I think that might have been, if there was anything that could be considered rivalry, it was probably that. And I think that might be true because I know that some of the people that were at 3D Realms after I had left, and then later when I started Gearbox and we started becoming successful, that they had later reported some of that the same thing about me. So that was weird, but I don't know. I was always kind of proud that those guys, were part of Apogee, and I thought that was cool.
So would we immediately recognize any of your stuff from Duke?
I don't know. I mean, maybe the most of my work is in the 4th episode, which was part of the Atomic Edition.
Right.
And the Atomic Edition, I did the first mission, I did the secret mission, I did the boss mission, and then I did an assist on a couple others.
Nice.
So I did the first and last and the secret level, the team was so small. Everybody's kind of involved. In the main game, I was mostly I was a beta tester with them when the first to the shareware launch. And one of the things I felt like kind of proud and kind of shitty at the same time, there's this bug in the build engine we called the save twice bug. And I'm going to go off a tangent, you can cut me off. But the way it works is there's certain things you can do where you can place, say, entities in your build using the tools. And the entities, the software would number them.
Okay.
It would number them from the first to last. So one of the things this was useful for was the spawn points in the deathmatch map. So you just say spawn point, spawn point, spawn point, spawn. And under the hood, it would say, okay, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5. And when you save it, that's 1, that's 2, that's front to back. But it would save front to back, and it'd save it off. And when it did that, so like this is the first one to go here. So then when you loaded it back in again, it would load it in reverse.
Oh.
So now when you saved it again, 1 was 8. 2 was 7, and it would reverse it. So if you play the game a lot and you care about being competitive, which at the time I did, like I was competing in Doom and Quake and those games and Duke Nukem, and the idea of in one compile, and it's not really a compile, it's just saving the map. Mm-hmm. The first spawn point would suddenly be the last spawn point. Like that changes the entire dynamic of the, imagine like this is where player 1 starts, that's where player 2 starts, and suddenly like you play a game and you're completely different spots. That's not good. That's not, every patch, it was like a crapshoot. And I'm like, guys, we have to, so we created a new process. In whatever I guess you could call QA. There was no QA. Yeah, we were our own QA back then.
Like
frankly.
what, 12 of you? Probably, like that.
And we created a process where we would check and make sure that we save the map and play it. And if it was the reverse order, okay, that's not the one. Delete that. Save it again, and then do it. And we called that the save twice bug.
Nice. All right, we'll come back to Duke Nukem.
Okay.
So you ended up leaving and you started a studio called Rebel Boat Rocker.
Well, I joined it.
Joined it, okay,
yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah, no, there was these guys, the Zelsnack brothers, Billy and Jason, and they were working at 3D Realms and they were really smart, and Billy was a genius. And before coming to 3D Realms, he had worked with Epic, and this was before Epic started getting into 3D stuff.
Yeah, Jazz Jackrabbit kind of days.
Yeah, and Billy was one of the pioneers of 3D graphics. If you go back to or real-time 3D graphics, if you go back to like the Michael Abrash books, like the early ones, they would reference like these sharp, here's this new idea from this kid, John Carmack, Here's this other idea from this kid, Billy Zelsnack. Like they're mentioned in that way. And in fact, if you look at the credits for Quake, Billy's included in the credits because he created the solution that John Carmack ultimately adapted for the dynamic lighting in Quake.
Interesting.
For example. He was a genius, and he solved problems in unique ways that other people weren't thinking about to get around the fact that computers weren't fast enough for what we wished them to do. And that was really what it all came down to. We could see and imagine 3D graphics in our minds as what we were ready for in the industry and as creators, but the computing power just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So we basically had to cheat, and everybody was coming up with all these clever ways to cheat in software rasterization to get around the fact.
OpenGL and all that kind of stuff.
Before that.
Before that.
Like this was before 3D hardware. We did not have hardware to help us. We were writing onto the just the CPU and making the graphics happen in software, and it was and the computers weren't that fast. So we had to be clever, and these guys were the cleverest, and Billy was super clever. So he left 3D Realms. And at the time I thought, wow, this fucker's a genius, and I like just spending little bits of time, I learned a lot, like so fast, that helped me. And but also he was a real critical thinker almost to a fault, where everything that was wrong with Apogee and 3D Realms and management and process, like he could see, and he was not afraid to tell everybody around him about it. So I'm like, wow, this guy's really smart, right? Not only is he a genius programmer, but he sees like all these things wrong with all these human systems, right? So he left. Well, he didn't leave. He got fired. And Scott called him a rebel and called him a boat rocker.
Well, there you go.
So then he named his new company Rebel Boat Rocker, and I'm like, that guy knows what's up. I'm gonna join him.
So you joined him.
Yeah. So
and the game that you guys were making was called Prax War, which was a first-person shooter. Yeah. And I remember, this is my memory of it. You're talking about how our memory can change things, but I just remember that being this really cool-looking first-person shooter. So what I want to know is, obviously the game never came out. Yeah. The company that never shipped anything. Yeah. So what was the sort of elevator pitch version of the game? How far did it get, and what happened to it?
The elevator pitch was, hey, we can do polygon soup, right? You're stuck in either 2.5D or with these kind of primitive-based building like you have in Quake, where you have to create these brushes and you have these very and that's what you're stuck with in real-time 3D graphics that you can put in a video game context for a first-person shooter, except for our technology. Our technology, we can just it's just a polygon, and we can draw a triangle any way, any orientation, and we have tools to create triangles any orientation. We can put any material we want on that triangle, and we can render it, and we can render it fast. And it was true. It was real. And this of course to this day is how the worlds are handled.
Sure.
To this day, we just feed triangles to the GPU, and the GPU draws them for us. And this was pre-GPU. This is all software. So it was incredible stuff. And so that was the technology pitch. And it's a first-person shooter. And what we can do is we can animate these things. And so we call them scripted sequences. So it was really fun, for example, to hear Duke Nukem talk and feel like I'm in like a little story's happening. There's a story in the shooter. Like, what's up? It feels there's a character. And it's fun to see, like, people liked watching the cutscene, like when Duke said, "I'm gonna rip off your head and shoot down your neck," and then like he rips the alien's head off and sits down and takes out the newspaper and starts whistling as he presumably proceeds to defecate in the neck of his dead beast. And so that led us to this realization that it's kind of fun to watch characters do stuff. Mario had just come out on the N64, the Mario game. And we can see the character animate and move around, and it was in 3D, and it was this whole revolution. Tomb Raider the first Tomb Raider had just come out, and we had a technology that allowed us to not only render those triangles, but we could record an animation or create an animation, a keyframed animation, and play it back arbitrarily. We called it a scripted sequence. The scripted sequence became one of the staple technologies that I think helped Half-Life be Half-Life.
Absolutely, sure.
Doug Wood was also one of our founders at Rebel Boat Rocker, and he took that knowledge. He became their head animator guy, doing that for Valve back when Valve was small for Half-Life, and he brought that with him. And that's one of the ways that we got the gig to do Half-Life Opposing Force.
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, that's the next.
But so we had technology, and we had this hunch that first-person shooting's fun, but if we could have a bigger world, an open world, the pitch was kind of Halo, vehicles, we had physics simulation. No, it was, we had physics simulation. We had a vehicle that basically looked like the Warthog. This was before Halo was announced. What happened was, there was a couple things. Billy was amazing and incredibly smart, but his priority was the renderer, and we did not have sufficient energy devoted towards the game simulation, and he was resistant to other people being in his code base. So, you know, I hired a programmer, and he basically ran him out of there, and I got another guy, and it was just difficult. We couldn't get enough of the game simulation done.
Right.
So ultimately, EA, after about 18 months of development, I think like on the third rewrite of the lighting engine, EA is like, dude, ship a game. And so EA pulled the plug. They canceled us, and I don't blame them, frankly. Yeah. I think they made the wise choice there, and in a way, the EA canceling Prax War. Right now, I should be fucking grateful, because that was the catalyst that basically everybody at Rebel Boat Rocker that wasn't Billy and Jason, we started our own company.
Yeah, and that's Gearbox.
And we started Gearbox.
And yeah, you started with contract work. You mentioned, so it was the Doug Wood connection. You get.
And there's some other people. Chuck Jones was up there, and I'd worked with Chuck on Duke Nukem. He was a 3D Realms guy that went up to Valve. Brian Martell, one of the founders of Gearbox, worked with Harry Teasley in the past up at Microprose, and Harry Teasley was up at Valve, and so we had a few connections there. But really, when we founded the company, we said, okay, we're going to do the opposite that we did at Rebel Boat Rocker, because Rebel Boat Rocker, we took every risk. Yeah. The risk we took was, let's create a new IP, let's create a new engine, let's create a company, let's create it all. And also a new paradigm in first person, right? Yeah. And so we said, let's take one risk. Let's create a company. Let's use someone else's IP. Let's use someone else's tools and technology, and let's just create a company. And if we can get our processes down, then we'll eventually get to the place where we can do the rest of it.
And you did, because the two expansions that you made for Half-Life as the company's first projects were fantastic. I remember I played them at the time and loved them. Opposing Force, where you played as one of the mercenary, the military soldier guys. And then Blue Shift, where you're Barney.
You are Barney.
You're Barney, the security guard. So, did you guys learn a lot by working in Valve's sandbox? And do you have any kind of good stories from?
It was a thrill. I mean, the universe that Valve created is just wonderful, and it was a lot of fun to spend time in. And it was really, I mean, what was neat about it was the technology was basically Quake. I mean, it was
it was modified.
I'm gonna use the word Carmackian, you know.
Well, it was modified.
It was
Quake engine.
It was Quake
at its ultimate core.
It absolutely was Quake, and so architecturally through and through it was Quake, which we knew inside and out. So that was really easy for us to just jump right in and get off with it. And there was the additions they made were cool. They were all like game coding kind of additions, which is exactly what you should do. And I was like, oh man, these guys are, how great, you know. And so we had all this fun with the stuff. And we'd gotten lucky. We'd hired some of the people that actually helped. This guy, his handle's Zoner, Sean Kavanaugh, who wrote the Zoner's tools, which is what everybody used to compile. Like all of Counter-Strike, for example, was compiled with Zoner's tools. And Valve started using Zoner's tools themselves for compiling their Half-Life maps, so we'd gotten lucky where we had some of those guys actually on our team, it was a lot of fun, you know, and it was really fun for me because when we shipped the game, I think we were 16 people when we shipped Opposing Force. When we started the company, we were 5. You know, and so we went from 5 to 16 in that 8 months, and it was an 8-month development cycle. Right.
Yeah, it's unheard of now.
Yeah, you can't do it now. But it's literally roll up the sleeves and do everything. Like I produced the game, I directed the game, I wrote it. Christy wrote a lot of it too, my wife.
Did you do some level design in there
too? I did a third of the levels I built myself. A huge percentage of the levels I built myself. I have shitty art in there. I'm not a great artist, but you got to do what you got to do. I have sound in there. There's some lines of code in there. It was so much fun because every one of us was like that. Everybody on that team, when you're only that many people, everybody's doing everything.
Yeah, you have to.
Like the whole game is everyone, and you can feel everyone in the game. My wife was pregnant with my kid, and he was born on January 8th, 2000, and Opposing Force shipped in October, I think, of 1999, right? So she was pregnant through that entire development cycle, and she was helping. She wrote the strategy guide. She did some of the writing of the game itself. She'd slept on a sleeping bag on the floor in front of my desk. It was so cool. We got to work really closely together on that project.
Would you guys at Gearbox today do Half-Life Episode 3 if Gabe or Valve called you up?
I don't know.
Or is that just like a pressure that no one should have?
I don't know what Half-Life 2 Episode 3 is, so I don't know. I don't know that we could or should. It's a fun universe. I'd love to spend more time in it.
Yeah.
I don't know what way that would make sense, though. And I don't know. I might be alone. I'd have to. I mean,
well, that's why I asked the question.
There's 300 people at Gearbox.
Right.
I can't.
Because for all I know, you have this like burning idea that you're just burning to do after having been in the Half-Life universe before.
I feel like we got done with what we wanted to do. You know, we did Opposing Force. We did Blue Shift. We did the PlayStation version of the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life, and that was a lot of fun because we got to clean up a lot of things and really tune it and kind of figure out how to make console games, which was like that.
Were you guys doing the Dreamcast version that got canceled too, or was that somebody else?
We were helping with it. There
Okay.
was a group out in the Bay Area, Captivation, that was doing the heavy lifting. We did the work. Like one of the biggest problems was a Half-Life save file was about 1 to 2 megabytes. A Dreamcast VMU was 128K.
Well,
and you had to have enough room for like 20 or 30 things on there, otherwise you couldn't pass cert, right?
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how to take a 1 to 2 megabyte file and figure out how to do 20 of them or 30 of them. And Steve Jones, one of our engineers, solved it, and he invented this brilliant like indexing concept that genius level stuff, like taking 2 megabytes of data and getting the same exact result out of like
an order of magnitude less. Yeah. So
many orders of magnitude.
you guys weren't done with contract stuff yet. We'll get to Brothers in Arms, your first original IP. Mm-hmm. You did Halo 1 for PC, which was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
I remember I worked at Official Xbox Magazine at the time, and we covered it. You were an Xbox Magazine, but this is Halo coming to another platform for the first time.
Yeah.
So you did 8 new maps, most of which I very fondly remember.
Yeah. A bunch of them are still kind of with the product.
Yeah, and Master Chief Collection, they're all there. The flamethrower, which there'd been like, it was unfinished in Halo 1. You guys finished it and put it in the game.
Created a plasma cannon or something.
So how was it working with Bungie and working with Halo?
I mean, to be fair, look, those guys, Bungie and Valve, they're kind of, when we were working with those guys, it's kind of like how we are sometimes when some people work with us, where we're busy, and they were busy. So it's not like they just kind of like, okay, here's all the stuff. Good luck, man. There's no manual. there's no help desk. Like you're just on your own, and you're doing the best you can to kind of interact. Like I was probably in the most fortunate seat because I got to have the direct kind of connections with some of the creatives, like especially like in the Valve time, getting sitting down with Laidlaw and talking about, okay, let's talk fiction.
Yeah.
And just figure not enough so it was constrictive, but to kind of figure out how to connect with it. And same with Bungie, where we kind of figured out, okay, what are we doing here? How are we going to connect up with this? And it was cool, man. We learned a lot. I think the biggest thing the engine was bizarre. It was like a totally different length. It was like we've been living on
their own thing.
Yeah, it was and these guys evolved from, like, Marathon was like a Mac product, right? So these guys evolved from a completely different ancestor. So it was like we're primates, we're Homo sapiens evolved from this line,
and they're aliens.
Suddenly there's this alien, and we figure out through this accident of evolution that we're able to mate and produce a whole new kind of offspring. And that's what it felt like. We're learning how to speak an alien language. We're discovering what the aliens are all about, and it was really fascinating. And one of the things that I think was that affected us the most, and by this point too, it was great because we'd had all this experience with all the Quake and Source technology. We had all this experience with Epic's stuff and how that was evolving. We also had some of our own technology that we were developing, and then we, as far as I know, to this day, we're the only external studio that's played with that Bungie engine. I'm probably wrong.
Just
because
Stubbs the Zombie is the only other one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
only other one.
But that was Seropian.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we got to see that and play with it and add to it, and it taught us a lot of stuff. The thing I think was the most profound was how everything was data driven, and we totally different architecture, different practices, but we took that seed of thinking. It's like a way of thinking, and it changed the way we thought, and then we developed a new way of thinking that led to how we invented this technology that lets us procedurally generate all the weapons in Borderlands.
Yeah.
And that and I know like from the outside it seems like this massive gap, but for us it was like Halo, Borderlands, like that like the development string was that for us.
Well, but I want to get Brothers in Arms was in
Yeah,
that mix
absolutely,
too. So
yeah.
we which was an Unreal, and was it
Yeah,
was always
yeah,
Unreal,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So,
but we have like there's different creative threads within Gearbox,
Sure.
and so yeah, so that was a totally different thread.
So Brothers in Arms
Yeah.
rather is the first original IP that ships.
And this is the interesting thing. Like if you look at us from the outside perspective, chronologically it looks one way, but inside it looks a little different.
It's
strange.
Yeah, I would never think about it that way. That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. The order in which things ship and how they appear to exist from the outside is totally different from how things are.
Well,
on the inside.
humor me on Brothers in Arms
Let's do
for
it.
a second, then.
We'll go with your chronology.
Phenomenal
And I'll
game
do
at
my
the
best.
time,
Yeah.
and there's really, in my opinion, there hasn't been anything quite like it.
Thank you.
Since I mean, it's this very, maybe Full Spectrum Warrior kind of had some stuff, this sort of strategic elements, but Brothers in Arms, it's this story-driven strategy and tactics and cover heavy game, as opposed to the Medal of Honors and the Call of Duties at the time, which were much more run and gun. So, what was the motivation behind Brothers in Arms, and did it radically change or evolve over the course of development? Like had it started as a run and gun thing and it found its voice? I'm always curious about these things.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, Brothers in Arms, it's very dear to me. In fact, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 was the last game where I produced and directed and creative directed the project. Everything after that point, like I'm executive producing and maybe having a production role or a creative role, but I'm not. Basically, this is my game.
In the trenches.
Like, I'm still in the
phrasing,
trenches, but I'm not like
World War I.
I'm not controlling in the trenches like I was on
Yeah.
that. So Road to Hill 30 was the last game I directed in the purest sense of the word directed. It was where it started was back in the day, like the path to Road to Hill 30 goes from Duke Nukem to Counter-Strike to Brothers in Arms. That's the path. That's that thread. So it's not like it's a different chronological kind of line. And I don't know if you know this, but we did the yellow box with Counter-Strike. Like we worked on Counter-Strike back in the day. The yellow box was the first commercial.
I can see it. I can literally see it in my head.
If you ever find the old yellow box and flip it over, there's the Gearbox logo on the back there. And then we did a lot of stuff that's still in the game, but that's a tangent. So Brothers in Arms started after Duke 3D. Brian and I, Brian Martell, before coming to 3D Realms, worked at Microprose, and he did all kinds of cool stuff there. And one of the things he worked on, aside from like Civilization and Civ 2, like I remember this guy walks in the office and George's like, "Hey, here's your new office mate. I hired him." And I'm like, "You weren't going to tell any of us? Like, we weren't part of this process." And I'm like, and I'm being a total dick. I'm like, "Why should you be here?" He's like, "Well, I've worked in the industry for a little while." "Oh, really? What have you done?" And like he starts going backwards through his history, and by the time he mentions Civilization, I'm like, there's literally 7 people that worked on Civ, right? And like one of them Sid Meier, and one of them's Bruce Shelley, They're like, it's just, if you go through the credits, it's like, it's crazy. and Brian Martell's one of them. So anyway, so another game he worked on there was called Across the Rhine, which is a World War II total strategic view as the Microprose style of the time was, right? Where you're dealing with World War II on the level of armies or army groups, right? It's like maybe battalion level if you're like super detailed, right? Like crazy detailed. You get battalion level, but like divisions are about where it usually stops, right? We just finished working on the Duke stuff, and it's like, it's really cool to be in the perspective of the character in the game. But the problem with first-person shooters is the whole world is dead and just frozen and waiting until the hero enters the room, and then just in that room the world wakes up and you deal with it, but the rest of the world's just frozen and waiting for you to. Duke starts to subvert that a little bit by trying to make it feel like there's other stuff going on in the universe, but for the most part the world's just waiting for you to arrive, and you're the only one. Like, it's you against everybody, you versus the world in a first person. This is how it was. And so our big idea was, in war, no one fights alone. And what's ironic about this, you'll notice if you look at the box on Call of Duty, the very first Call of Duty game, the subtitle is, "In war, no one fights alone." And there's a reason for that, because the first people I pitched it to was Activision. And we called it, the working title was a war game. And we got, we had a contract. We were working through the contract. We didn't execute it. We were like on the 4th or 5th draft, and I got sniped by Microsoft, who was creating this new platform, the Xbox, and they wanted this game, and they gave us a slightly better deal, so we went with Microsoft. But the pitch was, in war, no one fights alone. And we started with this, and in fact, at the very beginning, we weren't sure what war. We just knew whatever war is the coolest thing to do this in, we just want to make sure that we feel part of a unit. We feel like it's not just about, the big idea, it's about the guys next to us. It's more personal, it's more human, because we're first person, we're there, we're actually a person. So that was the big pitch. And did the deal with Microsoft and got started. And I hired this guy, Colonel John Antal, who is a U.S. Army colonel. Now, at the time, he was helping us with consulting. He wasn't an employee because he was still active duty. And he wrote a stack of books taller than me about war history and tactics. I used his books at West Point. And I discovered him because I was watching the History Channel a lot, which back then was the World War II channel. And there was this plan that was being talked about that the Germans used called the Schlieffen Plan, which was like this pivot move to sweep through France. And they do the map view, and then they show historical photographs, and they have a talking head, like a historian with a black background going, "Aliens." No, and he was saying, and he was saying like the Schlieffen Plan, and the guy was super sharp and super dynamic, and he knew his shit, and he was kind of fun to listen to, and it said. John F. Antal, author, historian. I'm like, I need that guy. Who's that guy? So a friend of mine up at Microsoft, who's not there anymore, he's done a lot of things, but at the time, this guy Jim Vievert, he's like, "Hey, I can hunt this guy down for you. You need to talk to this guy." And he got me on the phone with him. I was like, "This is the guy." So we met him, and we ended up kind of working something out, and he was consulting with us, and he taught me, like, I could teach a master's class on war history. He taught, like, we went back to, like, the Peloponnesian War all the way to modern day, and then we kind of honed in on World War II, and then we found our unit, and we got really in there, and I, like, if you had more time, I could get in there, and I could tell you all about D-Day and all about the paratroopers and how, like, you and I might be speaking German if it wasn't for this one unit. Like, it was literally, the world could be a very different place. And this was inspiring. And then the other thing Colonel Antal did was he got me in the room with the actual people, like the guys that fought, that actually were there, the actual soldiers that we were trying to tell the story about. And I discovered something really quickly, which was that for them, because to me, as I immersed myself in it, it's the most impossible test in the world, right? Think about if you're in a situation where the other team is literally trying to kill you, and you have a gun, and your job is to find a way to point it at another human being and to pull the actual trigger and actually kill them. That's your job. And it's not only your job, it's also your necessity, because if you don't do your job, they're going to do it to you. And these are the highest imaginable stakes. And it's like, it's not a video game anymore. You know, it's not this bullshit, like, you know, because to me, when I was playing, you know, Doom, it wasn't, these weren't guns. These were just icons that represented the system and the simulation for this, you know, the skill test, this reaction-based skill test. And when I'm talking to the veterans, it's like, this is real. This is like, holy fuck, you know? I'd never even fired a real gun until I started working on Brothers in Arms. Changed everything. And I learned that what it took, what got these guys able to do it, had nothing to do with what I thought it was. Because I thought it was about like nationalism and like duty and honor and country and all that. And those are really lofty values. But when push came to shove, it was always about the guy next to him. Like they didn't want to let their buddies down. Yeah. They didn't want to be cowards, or they loved their team, and this was their family, and it was so fascinating. And the other thing I learned was everything that video games teach us about how guns work and how actual firefights work, it was complete bullshit. The reality is there are lots of bullets fired, and most of them don't hit, but they're all fucking terrifying. Yeah. Because any of them could hit, and that's what suppression is. And we learned this idea of suppression, that if you just shoot in the direction of someone, a real person does not want to be exposed anymore. We would, whenever we brought somebody new on the team, Colonel Antal would say, "You stand behind that table," and he'd start throwing pens at them. And then like they tip over the table and get behind it, like throwing big wads of pens, like office pens at them, and just throwing pens, and the pens are hitting the table, and they're like hiding behind the table, don't want to get hit by the pens, you know? These are just writing pens. And that's suppression. And so that's how we discovered the mechanics. So we started there. We went for that. Yeah. The fallback was, if we can't figure this out, because no one's ever done this before, we have to invent this whole, like, what's the interface for giving commands? What's the interface for ordering dudes to walk around, and how to interact with the environment? Like, everything in Brothers in Arms, there's a lot of games that have borrowed from that, but when we did it, there was no game to borrow from. That was the first time that territory had been crossed. And we didn't know if we were going to be able to figure it out or not, but we did know we had a budget and we had a schedule. And so the fallback was, okay, we'll try our damnedest, and if we can't figure out how to crack the nut, well, we'll just go to run and gun. So the fallback was run and gun, not the starting spot. But we didn't have to do the fallback.
Yeah,
we
it worked.
It out. And it did, and I was so proud of the result, because I had no idea. It's like every game I launch, I have no idea. Like, I think it's cool, and then we launch it and we discover what the world thinks. But we were getting better reviews than Medal of Honor and Call of Duty, and we got better sales. And I mean, I wonder what the world would be like if we just went all in on that franchise and tried to annualize it like those guys are doing. That's not the path we chose, but and I'm kind of glad. We kind of like inventing, you know. There'd be no Borderlands.
Yeah, but
Borderlands would not exist.
I do want to ask you about that, though. Is you know, after I believe it was 3 games, there was a original Xbox sequel, and then the 360 third game. Yeah. No more Brothers in Arms. Yeah. There was a sort of a weird, well, no offense, a kind of a weird, attempt at the sort of Quentin Tarantino style, then which you guys walked away from that. So Brothers in Arms clearly near and dear to you. Yeah. Is it ever coming back? Is that what your new team in Quebec is doing? What is going on with Brothers in Arms?
We are actively working on more Brothers in Arms. You know, there's a saying in that suits in video game publishing, which is, a game doesn't exist until it's announced. And so we haven't announced anything yet. But it's no secret. I've told fans, we're working on more Brothers in Arms. But I want to make sure, like right now, we're doing it totally under our own weight, because we're now becoming Suits. Like, we're publishing now.
Yep. We'll get to that too.
Gearbox is publishing games. So one of the things that in some cases, and it is in the case of Brothers in Arms, we don't have to worry about any partner's interests. And when we do partner with people like publishing partners, and we do, and I'm grateful for the publishing partners that we've worked with and that we work with, we do care about their interests a lot. And but sometimes, the perspectives every piece has are unique to their situation. So when it's just us, then we only have to worry about our own perspective. And for me, it is very precious. And I don't want. It's hard. It's been a while, and so I don't want to announce the thing until I know and confident that what I'm announcing is what it'll be.
That makes sense.
And that what it will be will meet or exceed the expectations that have to get set.
Does that mean you'll want to control it more directly, or would you partner with somebody under the publishing label and let someone else?
No, we're
it?
working on it, and we will publish it, unless we have to change the strategy. But right now, that's the plan.
Cool.
But even like everything's dynamic until we figure it out. But that's happening. And that Furious 4 thing, like that was really interesting. There was a lot of pressure when we did the first game. When Ed Freeze left Microsoft, and I bought back the rights from Microsoft, and that enabled me to go multi-platform with Brothers in Arms.
Yep.
And so I did a deal with, I talked to all the publishers and we got some good offers, but I did a deal with Ubisoft because they made it easiest for us to get a PS2 version. And turned out PS2 won that. Xbox did a great job showing up, but PS2 won. And at the end of the day, I want to entertain as many people as possible and gratify them as best as I can. And most console gamers are playing PlayStation 2. So Xbox was a bold bet, but Xbox One wasn't ready yet for us to be, exclusive. So Ubisoft gave us that, and but we were kind of like, we were this thing that just showed up out of nowhere for them that they didn't have to think about. All they had to do was manufacture it and sell it and distribute it, and so there was just zero creative interest. And we were so cheap, like the cost, like all they really committed to was a publishing deal. There was nothing really up front. They didn't have to give any money up. Mm-hmm. So there was no risk in them other than like manufacturing costs, and the risks are like, we're going to manufacture a purchase order, so it's really no risk, right? So they didn't really have to take any risk on the first Brothers in Arms game. The risk was very small relative to the potential, but it blew up. Suddenly, oh fuck, where did this thing come from? This is really important to our business. So it became really important to Ubisoft, and Ubisoft, one of the things that's great about them is they have a really powerful central mind of
the editorial
design.
Board.
Yeah, Serge is a brilliant genius, and he and his team are great. And Yves himself gets creatively involved when things matter, like and so they were all up in our shit. And I think that their vision is amazing, and I think they should absolutely do their vision, but it wasn't our vision. And you can feel like if you go back and look at that Furious 4, it was perverting what Brothers in Arms,
I
what
thought
the identity of the brand was.
I remember thinking, oh, this looks interesting, but this is totally not what I want out of a Brothers in Arms game.
And I felt that way too, and it was a tough spot for me. I'll tell you, it was a really tough spot because I love those guys and they're so good, and I have a lot of trust in them, and I was worried about that. And I thought, to me, E3 would be the test. I'm like, I will do it. I will go up there. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. I'll do my job, and we'll see what the reaction is. And what was interesting was Ubisoft and Gearbox took away different things, right? We took away, hey, do you see? The people that love Brothers in Arms the most are saying this isn't right on tone. And they're like, yeah, but the people that we haven't talked to yet are kind of noticing this thing that looks different than they ever saw before. And both of us were right.
Yep, yeah.
But it's our IP. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be great unless we really believe in what we're doing. So we had to go a different way. So we figured it out, and Ubisoft and Gearbox are professionals, and we figured out how to deal with that. And some of what's cool though is some of the cool gameplay that was being pioneered in what Furious 4 was pitched at, that evolved. And I just said, guys, keep going. Just tear the franchise out of it. Just go in whatever direction your gameplay leads you. And that's what led to Battleborn.
We'll get to that too.
Isn't that interesting?
So like, you've got your threads.
Brothers in Arms goes to Battleborn. So crazy, right?
Well, I want to go back to the other thread.
Okay, yeah.
Borderlands.
Yeah.
So jumping back on that, that was not the game, that the shipping version of Borderlands for sure was very different than what it started out as, because I remember that it was a, if I have the story right, it was a pretty, let's just call it normal looking Unreal Engine first person shooter until one day some people on your team went rogue and completely redid the art style behind your back and then showed it to you. Do I have this story correct?
Kind of.
And that is the Borderlands we know today.
Kind of. I always think about a game in the promise of a game in terms of story, style, and design. And the design of Borderlands has been consistent from that was what we started with. The fast-paced, fun, and moment-to-moment action of a first-person shooter. Reaction time skill tests, aiming, moving, dodging, the feedback I get when I get a hit and stuff happens, like, so good. And blending that with the long-range, kind of addictive and engaging meta that comes from what we traditionally call role-playing games, where you have leveling up and loot and all that. And up to that point, they had never crossed over. Only very, very lightly and only in some weird cases, right? But we believe that they can be fully embedded and that they were not mutually exclusive. Borderlands was the bet. Let's prove it. We believe this is the case, and we think if we figure it out, we'll have both moment-to-moment fun and action and long-term engagement, and that hasn't been done before. Let's do it. Let's do it. And so that was the bet. It was a design bet. The story and the style followed. And when we did our first kind of concept art, we had all these interesting art styles that we'd considered, including an art style that ended up being what Brothers in Arms is. And I think
what Borderlands is.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
Brothers in Arms.
Thank you.
It's okay.
My brain did a thing.
I gotcha.
Did you notice that? My brain did a thing. That's cool. Some of the artists were kind of naturally going towards realism, but the concept art, we had several different treatments. And I think the first art director, this is what was interesting. The first art director, I think, wanted that more stylized kind of thing. The art team went more realistic. The art director ended up quitting. Then later, when we figured out that the tone and design begged for the stylized stuff, then the realistic artists all quit. So it's kind of funny. What happened, I wouldn't exactly say go rogue. What actually went down, there was a handful of people on the team, including guys like Stephen Cole, who was a guy I used to work with at 3D Realms, and Carl Shedd, who's ironically worked on Rage. He was at Gearbox and went to id, worked on Rage, and came back to Gearbox. So he shipped Borderlands, went to id, shipped Rage, then came back, shipped Borderlands 2. He's got a wheelhouse. One guy on the planet can say that. That's Carl. Actually, no, two guys, Carl and David Avery. But Carl and Cole and Martel, and a couple other people were kind of feeling like what we were all feeling, which was the realistic art direction was fighting against the tone of the design and where the story kind of wanted to go. I mean, even at the beginning, like I remember Matt Armstrong's first, like when he was like, he was just doing some simple like surface designs. Like, okay, he had his placeholder for what the currency was going to be called. That actually got written into the code. The currency was called cash money, right? The idea of like your dollars being called cash money doesn't fit with that first art direction, right? Like so much about the gameplay just wasn't fitting with that like realistic, hyper serious kind of art direction. And so Brian, what my experience was, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody said, "Hey man, did you see the stuff that Carl's been working on?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Isn't Carl working on what he's supposed to be working on?" And apparently Carl was starting to mess around with something that he was tinkering with Brian onto the side. And Brian was one of the founders of Gearbox, and Brian generally could give a shit about the plan. He just like whatever felt like something he wanted to touch, he would touch. And we joked, we called him an 800-pound gorilla because he would just go into a scene and usually like there'd be value at the end, but sometimes just knock a bunch of shit over. But always, you know, hey, this is what I think needs to happen, and, you know, just get in there and do it. So he had gone and he'd talked with some of the guys and just started getting them going off on this tangent. And I went to Brian, I'm like, dude, what the fuck you doing, man? It's like here's our schedule, and like we have a plan. He's like, okay, here's the thing. I think I figured it out. I think I know how to solve the discord, what's the word? Dissonance between the art direction and the gameplay. And can you trust me? And I'm like, dude, we are so late in development. Like, this is crazy. We've already announced, like we're promoting the game. we had our publishing partner make a very expensive trailer that they put at the VGAs with this whole other, you know, direction to it. Like, are you crazy? He's like, dude, I think I've got it. I'm like, okay, I'll give you 3 weeks. And like, we'll look at the demo. Can you do? He's like, okay, deal. So he's like, okay. So it wasn't exactly going rogue, but it was like, it could have been.
Yeah.
With Brian, it's always going rogue, but it's like, when I discovered, it's like, it's like, is it worth doing? Should we look at it? It wasn't right for me to look at it then, but he's like, basically the deal was, give me 3 weeks, we'll have a look, and then we'll decide if we shoot it in the head or not. But the problem was, you know, I have to worry about the business, because if we don't make more than we spend,
you got heads to worry about. Yeah.
The dream ends. We take risks. Gearbox takes crazy creative risks, but I always take them in a calculated way, where even with the riskiest thing we take, if the plane crashes into a mountain, we've all got parachutes and we can get on another plane. We got another plane. You know, I'm not, because like the dream is for us to keep entertaining, and especially when we make mistakes, because that's where the best lessons come from. Holy crap, have I profited from failure? Like, that is, every failure we've had is how we get all of our best successes. So that is the key, right? So I have to worry about it if something looks like it's going to mess up our ability to do basically what we say we're going to do. You know, we have a culture that fuels creativity and lets that happen, but we have to have some responsibility for it. So we made that deal. We found a way. You know, we got the 3 weeks. Just let it happen. And I remember when I went into the conference room where they had the demo they'd created to show me what it was, and I literally had no idea what angle they were going to take. I knew what all the concept art pitches were at the beginning, but it was like, it could be any of these 6 or some other crazy junk that, you know, Brian saw. You know, I don't know. I walked into the meeting thinking, this sucks, because I let these guys spend 3 weeks on this, getting even more invested, and I know I have to shoot this in the head, because whatever it is, it's going to be a radical, like, cost on our production.
Big monkey wrench into the.
It's an art. It's at the end of the day, there's a production problem, and that's going to rule the day. I'm totally open to be as creative as possible up until the point where we go broke. Right? We can't, if we go broke trying, then it's not a try, right? You have to be able to cross the finish line, or there's no, I mean, that's the big lesson from 3D Realms, right? If you cannot cross the finish line, you will die.
We'll get to that too in a second.
So I walked in there thinking, I'm gonna have to shoot in the head. These guys now care even more about it. But obviously I let it happen, which means there has to be some part which, you know, but to me the odds were like, this was like a 1-outer. And hold them, right? This is like a 4% draw here, you know, maybe 2.5%. And then I loaded up the demo and I saw it and I'm like, holy shit, okay, this is clearly the right answer. So I knew in the first 15 seconds that visually this was the right answer. But I let him go through the whole demo, because then I had to ask the question, let's imagine for a minute that this was the right answer. Can we do it? Can we afford to do it? Like, have we done the math yet? Have we shown our work? Can the production work out? And Steve Palmer, the senior producer, was in the room. He's like, we can do this. And I was like, holy shit, we can. And I got goosebumps. So then I immediately thought, holy shit, this is exciting. We have this. And then I'm like, oh fuck, we have a partner. I can't just make this. I have to fly to San Francisco.
Yeah,
I have to
go before the 2K bosses.
I got to convince Christoph and the marketing team and the sales team. I've got to figure this out. So what I did is I spent another 3 weeks. I directed a little. Well, actually, to be fair, all I really did was talk about some tone and a couple of shots. We had some awesome guys that are great at setting up cinematics that kind of did the most beautiful shots. They just came up with them. I just created the timeline with the song. It was, and in fact, it's the song, the video accidentally ended up. You can find it on YouTube, but there's an unlicensed song in it. But it's not from us. It somehow ended up on the internet. And it's called, if you search like Greenfields trailer, there's this old song from the 1940s that my dad used to listen to this band called the Brothers Four. And he had this old vinyl album. And there's this, and it's like this haunting, green fields are gone now, parched by the sun, like all a cappella with these, and it felt right. So I'm like, that's the song. And I just, for some reason that song came in my head. I'm like, I'm gonna cut it to the song. We're gonna edit this thing out. And I'm going to use this as my showcase piece. I'm going to take it to San Francisco. And I have the playable demo too, but I'm going to show them the trailer. First, I'm going to tell them the problem, because everybody knows the problem. We're going to remind ourselves the problem. I'm going to show them the trailer, let them screw around the demo, and then I'll show them the math that it all works. And I did it, and it worked. And they were on board. And I could tell they had massive fucking pucker factor, especially on the production side. Chow, who's awesome, like he's this guy at the production side of 2K, I could tell he was like clenching really tight there, like he's gonna make a diamond. But the sales or the marketing team was like, this is what we need. This is it. They were really hype. And Christoph got it, and they ultimately 2K, at the end of the day, I think what they did, they went in the room, and I think what they did is said, look, at the end of the day, it's Randy's IP, it's Randy's game. He could just tell us all to fuck off. So he clearly wants this. We either get behind him and help it happen, or we create all this friction that'll probably implode the project. So which one are we going to take, guys?
That's one way to look at it.
I don't know what happened in the back room. That's just the version of what happened in my head.
Yes or no answer. Would Borderlands still be around today if it had shipped with the more realistic visual style?
I have no idea. I wish I had an alternate universe where I could simulate that outcome. I have no idea.
Well,
what do you think? What do you think?
I mean, there's so many reasons that games click or don't click. Yeah. Timing can be one of them.
I think timing helped. Actually, timing was against us.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about timing with Battleborn too, which we'll get to that. So I think there's I don't want to judge it, but I think there's at least a coin flip's chance that maybe it wouldn't have made it. It wouldn't have resonated with people.
It's easy to argue that.
It's
easy to argue that.
But one game that did.
I got to tell you though, one of the most frustrating things, because the other thing I knew when I said let's go for it was, this will help, this will fix the dissonance, but I know it's putting a ceiling on us. I knew it was putting a ceiling on us, because there's, especially back then, there's just a huge percentage of the gaming audience that does not want a cartoon.
I remember,
they just don't want a cartoon. Yep. And I'll tell you that one of the most excruciating things for me.
You had the last laugh on that one.
Well, kind of. The ceiling's still there. We're just pushing it.
Borderlands 2 sold pretty damn well.
Yes, it did. Still against the ceiling on it. Like, let me tell you the evidence.
Pretty healthy ceiling.
Yeah, I'm not sad. I'm not sad. But like, when you swing for the fences, you want to think like, how do I, look, our mission is to entertain the world, so we are dismal failures. Borderlands is a horrific failure if our goal is to entertain the world. There are 7 billion people in the world. What's 25 million, 30 million units? That sucks, right? Like, it's a horrible failure. I was at the GameStop manager show. I can't remember which one, but I went. They brought me out there and they had me signing autographs and doing the whole thing, and there were so many managers that were so excited to come up and meet me, and I heard the same story like 1,000 times, probably not 1,000. I heard it several dozen times, which in that environment feels like 1,000. And the story was this: Randy, oh my God, I love your game. I love it so much. I love Borderlands. I'm like, well, it's a team effort. Thank you so much. And they're like, I love Borderlands so much. Let me tell you, I work at this GameStop and blah, blah, blah. And I get customers that come in and they say, what do you got? Like, I'm looking for something, like, you got to try this game. And they always say, I don't like games that are cartoons. I say, try it anyway. And if you don't like it, bring it back the next day. And they do, and then they love it. And they think that I like hearing the story. And I hate the story because what it means is that naturally people don't gravitate to the pitch. They have to be convinced of the pitch. And then they try it, and it's only after they try it that they get engrossed in it.
Interesting.
And that's proof of the ceiling that I'm talking about, and we have to overcome that with every unit.
Well, a game that you did take to the finish line historically, Duke Nukem Forever. I've been dying to ask you about Duke Nukem Forever, and I think I'm almost out of time.
Well,
I need a part 2 with you.
Okay.
Because we still have like present day Gearbox to get to, or you're gonna have to come back for a part 2 another time. But Duke Nukem Forever. So let's end with this. And I know
that's a good one.
Your associates outside are going to be like, well, what about Gearbox Publishing and all the stuff we want to talk about now?
Yes, let's end with Forever.
I have to pick up my kid from
I understand.
from camp, otherwise they'll throw me in jail. So
let's
Duke Nukem Forever. What is your honest assessment of that game? How it shipped when you and your team?
I am the worst person to ask. Okay, because I worked at 3D Realms.
I know. That's why I'm curious as to your perspective.
And I know about an obscene amount of dysfunction that happened at 3D Realms in the dozen years from when I left to when they went away. And I love it. And not because I think it's the greatest game ever, but because my expectations, when I got to experience what I experienced when I like my situation was the character that I think I owe my career to, the first commercial product I made, like on the side of the road in a horrible, horrific accident, dying, and we happen to be in the middle of the desert and there's nobody else around, and we happen to be in a fucking ambulance right there, and it's like, okay, we're gonna give the CPR, we're gonna help it out, right? But like, I mean, George and Scott basically came for rescue. They're getting sued, they're broke, they had laid off the whole team, and George and Scott brought me over to one of the guys' houses, I think David Regal's house, and showed me the game. And I just couldn't even believe that. First of all, I couldn't believe that there was something there.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot there, and some of it was effing brilliant. Like the whole restaurant scene with like where you get shrunk down. Like this, this is like. It was cool. It was really fun. Like, no, you can't get away with that stuff in any other franchise on the planet. This is why I'm the worst person to ask, right? Because the problem with Duke is it was legendary. So to the outside world, expectations were the highest possible thing. George and Scott have been promising the best game ever made for over a decade. Yeah. Right? I mean, the term vaporware was created to describe Duke Nukem Forever. And Duke Nukem Forever for 10 years in a row got top billing in Wired Magazine's Vaporware of the Year award until they decided to give it a lifetime achievement of vaporware and never talk of it again, right? So the expectations the world had were here. Meanwhile, I knew how George and Scott managed things. I knew how they operated. I knew the team. I knew the people that had left, that joined Gearbox. I knew the people that were still there. And I knew what was possible in that environment because I was in that environment. And so my expectations were like, they're below the frame of your cameras. So my expectations were down here. So when a thing showed up that was like here, and this is where the world thinks it is, and I think it's down here, this radically exceeded my expectation. So that's why, to my stupid, unobjective eyes, it was amazing. But to everyone expecting the greatest game ever, it's like, it was rubbish. And there's like this penalty, right? Let's say the game, I don't know what the game actually is. Is it a 6? Is it a 7? I don't know what the fair assessment is. Metacritic says it's like a 6, I think, or 5 or 6. What does it say?
Somewhere around there.
It's probably around there. Which means half the people gave it a lot less, and half the people gave more to a lot more. Because that's the average of all the things, right? I think what happens is, especially when it comes after a game like Borderlands, like the world suddenly says, oh, Gearbox is fixing things. And so you already have expectations here, and Borderlands just kind of surprised everybody and blew everybody away. And now, oh, Gearbox is taking over this legendary thing. Like, oh my God, it's going to be I mean, the YouTube views on the trailer got more than the Call of Duty game that year. It's like the most viewed thing in the universe of video games that year is a phenomenon, right? So there's no way it could live up. So like, let's say it's a 6.5.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but to me it feels like an 8.5, but I'm obviously wrong and I'm not objective. But let's say it's a 6.5, and the world wants an 8.5. that difference there, they don't give it a 6.5. That difference is now a penalty, and so those people give it a 4.5. And that's because I can't imagine, and like to me it was flabbergasting. Somebody gave it like a 3 or a 2 or something. It's like I can't imagine what that's like. I've played games that I felt like are 2 or 3s.
Did you ever?
And it's not that game.
Did you ever think about buying it but then burying it forever and not putting it out?
I had no option. No, here the situation wasn't that. So the situation was that game had to be delivered. So it was, my options were,
in order for you to own the IP.
No, just
that was the
here's my options.
Okay.
Forget about, like, it's not that I took a Hippocratic oath, but I keep driving in the ambulance and let it bleed out on the side of the road. That was option 1.
Yeah.
Or option 2, I pull over and help it. And pulling over and helping it means Duke Nukem Forever has to ship. Take-Two was suing 3D Realms. So the deal, I stepped in front of the bullet. I went, like, we did a hasty deal so that those guys, you know, had something, and then I flew out to 2K and I said, I have some crazy news for you. You're now suing me, and we're working on Borderlands 2 together. How are we going to work this out? And they're like, well, you're going to deliver Nukem Forever. It's like, I can do it. Here's what I need for help, but we can do it. We have the best producers in the world. There's enough there. It's basically assembled by the 3D Realms team.
Yeah.
We can hire an external team that can help port it to the consoles and build a multiplayer game, and we can assemble the pieces and deliver it for you. And you know, I to this day I swear we have the best producers in the world because we fucking did it. You have no idea how painful that was.
I mean, it's a legendary situation.
It is legend. We have a Guinness Book of World Records hanging on our wall for the longest game development history. For that, like, it is just insane. And I wasn't sad because I did like it. I'm glad. I feel better about a world where we all got to see the end of that story.
Me too. And
than one where it just went away.
And that's why I'll tell you, like, I don't think it's an 8.5. I don't know what it is, but to me, as someone who's, I mean, Doom was the game that sort of changed everything for me as a gamer, and I became a full PC gamer. Duke Nukem 3D, all the Build Engine games, all the Quake Engine games, you know, that was my jam. Yep. So Duke Forever, I was one of those people where it just was this unicorn. Yeah. And so for me, I appreciated the fact that it was like a playable piece of video game history.
Yeah, right.
I always appreciated it for that.
You know, in hindsight, and I pitched this at once, but everybody just got, the hype was so big, the sales force and the marketing team, and even at Gearbox, and I think especially with the 3D Realms guys, it just got, maybe this will work. I don't know. But to me, the pitch should have been, it should have been $20. The package should have been wrapped in brown paper, and it should have said Duke Nukem Forever Bootleg Edition. And that should have been the package, and the console version should have been like, is it faux, like, brown paper, you know? And it's like, this is the thing that shouldn't even exist. But if you want to see what happened, if you want to see how it happened, here it is, and it's only $20. And that would have been a play, I think, that would have changed everything. But you know, that wasn't up to me.
The last thing, because we do have to go, sadly, but Duke Begins, or the future of Duke. Will Randy Pitchford and Gearbox make another Duke Nukem game someday?
I hope so. I didn't step in front of the thing. I didn't step in front of the bullet and suck down all of the pain just for that to be the end of the story.
Good.
I think
that's what I want to hear.
I think we're now in a world where we can see what we can do with the character. And you know, there's a saying that the suits have in publishing now, which is, a game doesn't exist until it's announced.
Well, on that note, Randy Pitchford, that's only like half the story. There's so much more to get to.
You know what? I will come back because
I want you to come back.
We should schedule when I can, because I feel like these should exist together, because I think if we stop there, that's kind of giving.
Believe me, I wish I could stay.
So let's do it.
We've been talking for an hour and 35 minutes already.
We'll schedule something right now, and I'll be back, and we'll do the rest of it.
In the meantime, Randy Pitchford, CEO of Gearbox, thank you so much for telling me all of your stories so far. There's more. That was all fascinating. And for much more with the best, brightest, most fascinating minds in the video games industry, stay tuned every month for a new episode of IGN Unfiltered.